Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Harnessing Contrast, the simple podcast where we discuss the small details that make high performers in powerful companies stick out from the pack. Today we have the privilege of having Derek Kirkham on the podcast. Derek Kirkham is an accomplished pediatric dentist who has built and managed several practices during his career. Derek has also spent time as a teacher to dental residents working in Denver's Children's Hospital. Beyond this, Derek is also the chairman of the board for Nursing and Therapy Services of Colorado. This is a non-profit organization that helps provide care for children with major health care needs. Derek, thanks for being on the show with us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Derek, could you just take a moment and share with the audience where your dental practice started and a little bit of the journey that you've had since then?
Sure. That's a long journey.
Yeah.
Colorado Springs is where our dental practice is located, and we've now branched down further south to a little town called Canyon City, which is a little south of Colorado Springs. Went to dental school in Denver, Colorado at the University of Colorado School of Dentistry. Then did a stint in the Air Force and had an opportunity to do a residency with them for 1 year at the Air Force Academy, and then served up in South Dakota with the medical group up there, and then decided to specialize in pediatric dentistry and went through the match program to get into a residency, and was accepted at the Children's Hospital in Denver. So we moved back to Denver, and there did a 2-year pediatric dental residency. And following that, decided to move back to Colorado Springs because we enjoyed it there and had an opportunity to join a practice that was looking to have a pediatric dentist come in. And that, after about 8 months, kind of proved to be maybe not my forever job, and decided that maybe being part of a general dentistry group as a pediatric dentist wasn't going to match practice styles as well. I then approached a fellow resident who was a year behind me, that we were pretty good friends during the residency, and he had also gone to University of Colorado School of Dentistry, and we decided to start a group practice together with 2 of us because we both had been in the military. We liked the group environment. He was in the Navy, I was in the Air Force, and so we decided to do a practice together, a scratch practice, which the timing for us was really good because at that time Colorado Springs was growing, had about 7 pediatric dentists, 2 of which were at the twilights of their practices and were looking to retire, and 2 new guys coming into town. There was opportunity. I think we scared the bank to death that we were going to do a scratch practice with 2 of us, and they wanted to know what we were going to live on. Like, they thought we were just going to borrow money for working capital just to live on. We said, no, we have jobs. We were at the time both working for a pediatric dentist in Pueblo, Colorado, and continued to work for him while we started our practice. So we built out a facility that would be big enough for 2 doctors to work at the same time, which we then did not fully finish out as far as equipment and different things that you can kind of do as you size up from the very beginning. But we worked the practice part-time while we worked our part-time jobs. Each one of us taking a turn, and then we finally hit to the point where we thought we could pay ourselves part-time and put our full-time efforts into it, and began to grow a practice that has now blossomed into 2 offices that have the capacity to have 2 dentists at the same time, sometimes even 3, and then this other little satellite clinic, which now we've actually got our own clinic there in Canyon City as part of the group practice. So there's 4.5 full-time, or it's a half doesn't make full-time. There's 4 full-time docs, and we have a guy that we work with part-time that helps with the Canyon City office, and once in a while he works in our office, and kind of looking to maybe add a 5th doc to just fill in some holes where we have opportunities to grow. So it's been quite a growth process. We went from a staff of 2 in the beginning to now having over 20 employees, and had varieties of arrangements of how all that works together, and we're learning as we're going.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's quite the journey. So, could you tell us when you first approached hiring for your practice, were you looking for soft skills, people skills, if you will, or were you looking for just hard-tack dental skills?
Well, in the realm of dentistry, you've got some fairly, how to describe this, got some challenges of taking somebody that has some training and then really training them to be able to assist you in all aspects of dentistry. And we were very lucky that we actually had a dental assistant come and seek us out. Her dad was doing the flooring in our practice, and he's like, "Hey, there's these new docs. You ought to." So, and her name was Natalie, and she sought us out. She kind of interviewed us. We're like, "Yeah, we like this girl. She's pretty sharp."
She's go get her.
She was working for a pediatric dentist in town, and wanted to have a new opportunity, and we hired her, and her skills and her organizational stuff, the ordering and the stocking and everything that is the way it works now was all set up by her. We're just like, how did we luck out with Natalie? And she just had the skill set that she needed to really get us established, and then we hired a front desk person, kind of learning thing there, that she had some dental skills, and so the skill set more, I guess, was more hard as far as the skills for dentistry, both of which these two people have since transitioned out of our practice because maybe they didn't have the people skills as we grew.
That's interesting.
Natalie was, obviously the lead dental assistant. We hired other dental assistants, and when we were small, when there was 4 or 5 dental assistants, she handled that job fairly well, but she didn't have the ability to manage a larger number of girls. In dentistry, we often, and this can be jokingly, it's like a hen house. You end up having a bunch of ladies work for you. There are male dental assistants out there, but not very many of them.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the hen house has its constructs of pecking orders, and Natalie didn't handle it very well at the top. She just didn't have those skills, and so she still wanted to be a dental assistant, didn't necessarily want the management part of it. And the same thing happened with our front desk gal. She kind of became the practice manager because she was the most mature person that was there. But later on, her lack of management skills affected her ability to lead. And no fault of her own. These are both girls that neither one had college degrees, didn't have training, and that's one of the challenges that you have, is that in a dental practice you don't have the financial ability to go hire an MBA trained leader to run your practice unless you are a huge practice.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, you are left to try to build a team by looking for personalities that do a good job and then trying to hone them. And it just a kind of a crazy idea that Jeff and I both had was we need to do some training with our team. Where do we start? And there was definitely some communication issues.
Yeah.
And so we started by, as a team, reading How to Win Friends and Influence People
By Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, by Dale Carnegie. And it was kind of enlightening. There was some girls that just ate it up, and one girl in particular who was our third hire, which came about because one of the pediatric dentists that I mentioned earlier was going to retire. He couldn't get anybody to buy his practice. He had a very old, antiquated practice. So we approached him and said, "We'll buy your patients." There's kind of one way to deal with that in dentistry, is that he would send out a kind letter to his patients saying, "I'm retiring, but hey, there's these new guys in town. They're both board-certified pediatric dentists. I am recommending them as your new dental home," and then we would pay him a portion of the production that would come from the patients that would come and see us from his practice. And so he ended up being able to walk away from his practice without a total loss, but over the next couple of years we paid him off per visit kind of a thing as those patients came to see us.
Interesting.
And then we acquired his staff. which was 3 ladies that had been working for him.
Okay.
And a couple of them had some pretty strong personalities, and one of which is still with us today. She's a go-getter kind of girl, but she was very young, very opinionated. I was kind of like, how long is this girl going to stick around? And she read that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and realized that, oh my word, I'm one of these people that doesn't communicate very well and doesn't have the skill set. And she worked at things and realized that she can't just be this fold my arms and be stubborn kind of a person. I've got to be able to work through things. And she has since been one of our leaders as far as the assistants. And as she has gotten a little bit older and more mature, and dental assisting is kind of hard on the body, just like dentistry is. And she decided to be a front desk person. And she's now one of our front desk leads. And doesn't have a college degree, and a lot of these girls just are high school educated, and you're trying to help them fit into a workplace where you teach them a skill, but they also have to have these interpersonal relationships to be able to work with families and the kids, but also their teammates, which is probably the bigger challenge. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it is an interesting environment, a pediatric office, because you've got the high stress moments of surgery where the child may be under anesthetic and asleep and things have to go right, and you're on a time crunch because your next patient's in the waiting room,
or and then when they're awake
and crying and barfing and all those great things.
And you gotta manage the child
and the parent.
Yeah. And some parents are like, just sit there and be quiet, and there's other parents who are like, oh, my little Sally, I don't want her to have a hard experience, and just kind of like, well, kids cry at Walmart too. It's just, what is the cause of it? And it's not always the dentistry. Sometimes there's kids that just cry. They're up front throwing a fit because they didn't get the toy they wanted.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something rather interesting. You said, unless you're a large practice, it wouldn't make a whole lot of financial sense to hire a trained MBA leader. So now that you're approaching 3 practices, 2.5, if you will, 5 docs, is somebody with that experience becoming more attractive to you to manage the business side of things?
Yeah, but it's still, if somebody wants to take on like a $60,000 a year job at that trained level.
Yeah.
But that's also managing the business portions of stuff, which we've had an office manager for quite a few years now that's done a phenomenal job. She does have a college degree, but she's not a trained MBA. But she's a smart lady that does really good with business stuff and does really well with all of the girls, or just managing the staff. But also, she's not trained necessarily how to manage staff, and that's been one of her struggles. That's taken a lot of time, and her style has worked, but she's decided to step away from it because, as a salaried employee, she finds herself working all her evenings to get her business stuff done because this staff stuff takes too much time.
Yeah.
So we're trying a new arrangement right now where we're having more of our leads take more of those kind of responsibilities on, and letting her focus more on the business. So we'll see how that works versus having just one practice manager.
Yeah.
Because of the different locations, and so we've kind of created a little bit of a challenge for ourselves. Just the normal dental office that you think about has 3 or 4 employees and 1 doc, and ours is a much different environment where we have multiple docs, multiple locations, and part of the joy of what we do is that you don't work with the same person every day. So there's some variety. That
is
I
nice.
have to look on my schedule and say, all right, who's assisting me today, and where's their skill level, and you're always trying to grow the next person. And so some days you're helping to train somebody doing chairside dental assisting, and some of them get it really fast, and others really struggle for a long time. And so you're going to build and encourage and help and be direct, but not mean, but to help this person. Like, I need you to do it this way and this way, and some people really thrive at doing some of that, and then others kind of weed themselves out. And so, but some of those days can be a little bit challenging because you have the kid that might have some challenges with coming in and having it down, and then you have a girl that's struggling to, or I should say an assistant, because it could be a male assistant also. I've had some good male assistants in the past, but there are not very many out there. That's struggling with their dental skill set and trying to build them. So kind of back to that book thing, we've read lots of team building books. We read one that I'm going to bring back around again is just financial stuff. We read a Dave Ramsey book, and it was enlightening to me of where my assistants are in the realm of they're in debt and they're making payments and they make stupid purchases, and and it affects them personally when they're stressed and strapped because they've got this big huge car payment and I have this big huge phone payment and I went and bought all this furniture and and living beyond their means, and then they come to work and they're stressed that they don't make enough money and can I get more hours, and so we just try to help build them as people as much as we can. I don't know if that answers those questions, but
no, I think so. I think any quality form of employment is focused on building people and teams, and then a side effect of that is the bottom line, which is great. In companies and individuals that get that mixed up usually weed themselves out pretty quick. Just changing gears here. In the Western culture, the United States, Canada, doctors who own private practices are normally the big bosses in their business, kind of similar to you. But in some cases, the title of doctor doesn't always mean that they're great leaders who are trained to lead large teams in difficult situations. How have you seen this in your own experience with maybe docs you've worked with, or maybe learning opportunities for yourself?
Just even my own personal experience. In dental school, you are so focused. I was going to use the word stressed, but you're so focused and stressed on learning how to do dentistry. And there's a statement that gets made to you multiple times through school, like, when you get out, the dentistry is going to be the easy part. And you're like, there is no way that this is ever going to get any easier because this is so hard, because you're just, it is challenging. The first years of dental school are just like medical school, all the hardcore sciences, plus you're learning hand skills, which sometimes some people's hands work great and others don't. And you're stressed about learning dental anatomy and how to make your fingers do things you've never done before, and how to work in a mirror and upside down and backwards, and everything's very visually, you've got to understand what you're doing with a handpiece that's going 400,000 RPMs. And so there's not a lot of training. You have some business classes, like, okay, these are the basic things of your business. You have, these are your account receivable, and this is this and this, and and it's just flying over the top of your head because it's not applicable at that moment.
Yeah.
And they don't even really go into, like, here's how to manage staff. There's no training whatsoever.
Okay.
And so you even get to a residency program, so like the Air Force residency program. I step in, all of a sudden I'm an officer, I'm an officer in training, so I was still being overseen by a senior doc as far as my dental stuff goes, but then they try to plug in and they want you to have these little leadership experiences. But yet my assistant, who's a young airman, is overseen by her sergeant. And so if I have a problem with my assistant, I go to the sergeant who's over her.
Interesting.
And so they're much more focused on their leadership. And so as I go to my next base, where now I'm a credentialed doctor, I'm still focused on practice care, but I have a senior officer that's over me, but I'm still not really managing my assistant because there's still the enlisted ranks that's happening in. And so I don't really have a supervisory job much in the Air Force as a young captain. So then getting out of the military, separating from the military, going back to a residency program where it's designed again to train you as a doc, and again I'm working under another doc and I'm learning more dental skills and more stuff about pediatric dentistry, but all of the assistants are being managed by the management stuff that's hired and run by the hospital.
Yeah.
So I still don't have a whole lot of management skills.
Okay.
And so when you all of a sudden open your doors to practice and you're now having to be the owner doc and the boss and the guy that does all the work. And it's not that the assistants aren't doing their work too. They're seeing patients for hygiene, and they have to have their skill set, and you have to manage them, but you also are the guy that if somebody's not sitting in the chair doing dentistry, you don't make any money in the practice.
Yeah.
And so it's time-wise very challenging to be the manager boss, because I look at other organizations where the CEO, their job is to be the CEO, but everybody else makes the widgets. And in dentistry and in medicine, the doc is making all the widgets and trying to do all the management.
Yeah.
And you really feel the lack of training. I mean, the very first time we had to fire somebody, we were using a consultant to help us get started, and we were having this conflict once we took over this other practice, and some of the assistants weren't getting along, and there was a lady named Joy who wasn't very joyful, and we decided that she wasn't a great fit, and our consultant said, I'll be there tomorrow to fire her.
Oh gosh.
And we kind of learned how this process worked, but then the very first time I ever had to fire somebody, it was just like, oh, we're going to have to fire somebody. And it's hard.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like, but I'm the boss. I can't delegate this to anybody else.
It's your job.
And so I have to go through the emotional wrestling of that right at the beginning of the day, because you don't want, or sometimes you do it at the end of the day, but then all day long in the back of your mind, well, at the end of the day, this person's not going to be part of our family anymore. And it's a tough thing, because then you got to be kind and happy and talk to the kids all day long, and yet you got this emotional leadership thing going on, and you got to go make all the widgets doing all the dentistry, and have that face on while you're then also being the management face. And so it is a struggle, and I think it's something that medicine is moving more quickly away from the doctor being the manager boss than dentistry, but it's even being lost in dentistry, where in medicine, because of Medicare years ago and big hospital systems, especially right now, hospital systems are buying up specialty group practices. And so, I mean, literally when I don't know if I should name too many names, but a major medical group came into town, and they were going to be the competing group against other hospitals in town. They approached big medical practices and said, you either join us, or we're going to start our own cardiology group, or our own orthopedic group. We're going to bring our own doctors in, or you can become part of us. And so there was a lot of practices that got sold to big hospital systems. And so these docs now they just earn a paycheck. All they do is doctor. And I'm sure there's still some management as far as their assistants and different things. Medicine's a little different, and maybe only surgeons use really, assistants or surgical techs the way that we do. But in dentistry, there's a trend right now going towards dental maintenance companies, or support companies. So DSOs are what they're called, and they've been around for a long, long time. But there's a major push right now that these groups are coming in and saying, hey, we can save you on materials, and we can help you in your HR, because I don't have an HR department. I have me, as a group, and then we try to consult with a lawyer here and there, and like, what do we need to do? And so they bring in an HR department that you can consult with, and they will help you hire and fire, and they will help you do things. But then they want part of your they want that cut of your practice.
Yeah.
And there are docs that are just like, I'm tired of doing all this other administrative stuff. I just want to be a doc. And so they are selling out to some of these practices. And now, because of private investors, and they're trying to make it look lucrative, like, hey, you can invest in dentistry and be an owner person financial wise of this great lucrative thing, which has always been the profit that the docs made by doing it all. And some docs are giving that portion of it up, just saying, well, yeah, you could buy a portion of my practice, and they get paid out well for it. But then for the rest of their career, that portion goes to this other company, which then helps to manage some of those other things. And so it's hard to wear both of those hats, and it's something that I've appreciated to be part of a group. But then there's inner dynamics between the doctors that you've got to work through.
Yeah.
And you've got to have some people that are on very much the same page, because we've had those trials also where you have a doc that's just not performing at a level that you want him to be. And letting go a doc is a big deal.
Yeah.
But
it's like letting go of a vice president
but we've had to go through that, because it was just like, look, this is affecting us as a practice, your image that you're trying to present. We very much try to be, our practice is all about quality patient care and good experiences for kids and parents. And along with that quality patient care comes good dentistry, because there's good dentists and there are bad dentists.
Yeah.
There's some that are just kind of mediocre dentists.
It's kind of frightening, because you expect all of you to be experts. But
yeah, and stuff fails in dentistry for everybody, because the mouth is such a harsh environment, and you're trying to repair things that have been destroyed by natural causes that are influenced by diet and hygiene and everything else. But if somebody doesn't do their very best to be the best technical dentist they can, then you have higher rates of failure. And it costs you many more times to repair something and redo than it does to do it the first time. Because the insurance company's not going to pay you the second time, and the family doesn't want to pay you the second time. And so then you're eating it and you're using your time redoing things. And
yeah, it sounds like time. I mean, time is valuable for everybody, but as a doctor, if you're, like you said, if your butt's not in the chair, you're not making money. You are the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike people who work an office job or are in a C-suite kind of position, you don't necessarily get paid per se to sit down in a meeting with your staff.
Oh no.
It's
costing you money.
Yeah, you could argue that that's leveraging more profit later because your team's performing better, but there is no direct relationship with the bottom line when you're meeting with your staff. You probably meet with them in the morning and maybe wrap up at the night, but that time is just meant to invest in productivity the next day or that same day.
And having a monthly meeting where we take an afternoon and we feed them lunch. We try to talk about policies and procedures and flow and different things that work, and doing those books. And you're paying them to be there, and some of them don't see it as valuable time, didn't do their reading assignment, you're coaching some kids that just, some of them barely got out of high school, or they, in two ways, they're that young they barely got out of high school, and two of them, and also some of them barely got out of high school, if you know what I mean. And so some of them aren't super learners, but some of them really excel in doing hands-on stuff, which is fun, and others don't, and they just struggle through it. And if at the beginning of my career I thought, I'll hire this team and this is going to be great, there are few members of my team that have been there for that long. And so especially the younger entry-level dental assistants, that even if they've gone to some schooling, don't have the skill set that you need to have the day you hire them. So it's a constant learning process. And some of them get bored with it and move on, and some of them just don't work out and you have to let them go, and others, they get married, they have children, they decide they want to move on and do other schooling, which we've been all about. We've had a couple of them go on and have other careers, and when they first start talking to us about it, we're very much, we want you to grow as a person, and it's fun to see them move on versus the ones that don't have a work ethic and you had to let them go.
Yeah.
But you constantly have this turnover.
It sounds like you're facing a very similar problem to most of the business world, that 80% of your work is done by 20% of your staff.
Probably.
More or less, yeah. And that's rough because you pay 100% of your staff.
Yep,
you sure do.
Well, in this day and age, too, they come in and they want to be paid more than any of your assistants are making currently, just because they feel like, well, I can go down to taco time and I can make this much per hour. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, but do you want to work there? We try to create an environment that is much more inviting, and that there's opportunities to grow, and then we still have to try to keep up with this growing wage demand, but yet the insurance companies and stuff we work with haven't come out and said, "Oh, we understand that you guys are struggling.
Here's stronger reimbursement.
We're going to raise our reimbursement." That has not happened.
Yeah.
And so it's pinching on both ends. And fortunately, some of our fixed costs, we've taken advantage of better interest rates, and we've tried to make some good financial decisions. But when you invest several hundreds of thousands of dollars to open a dental clinic, because it's not as easy as just signing a lease and put a couple desks in and you got a business with a phone line.
Yeah. Where's the Ethernet cord? It's not that easy.
This is plumbing to every room and nitrous oxide to the rooms and med gas stuff that has to be professionally put in, and then just the whole construction thing. So most dentists, when they set up, that's why they're there for long periods of time, is to pay all that stuff off and then to write it all off on the books and then be able to keep up on it. I mean, kids are hard on practices. And
yeah.
Pediatric only, those little fingers that are rubbing down the wall.
Yeah.
And wear on things and sometimes some vomit and some spit and some and strollers and
sticky popsicles
and everything that comes along with kids and all sorts of bodily fluids that you find later on the walls and other things.
Oh my gosh!
It's a constant upkeep to keep the place clean, functioning, looking good. And so we've gone through some minor remodels and some major remodels, and that costs money. And so those are big decision kind of things while you're sitting there trying to do dentistry.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to go back a couple gears here to the staff demanding more money for advanced work when they could be making more at Taco Bell or wherever. I don't know if it's my generation, the rising generation, or if this is just a perspective that's always been missing, but it's so crucial to understand that not all pay is monetary.
Mm-hmm.
And that, yes, they can go work at Taco Bell for $15 an hour and
or even more.
Or even more than that, depending on where you live. But then their resume will say Taco Bell.
Yeah.
And when they go to get a big boy job or a big girl job, they're not going to have anything on their resume of value. But if they turn around and they choose to work for a little bit less, for maybe a pediatric dentistry office, and they can say, I've worked in high stress situations where danger's on the line, you got to be careful, and that looks a lot more attractive on a resume than Taco Bell does, and that is payment in itself.
It is, and also I don't know what I haven't worked for Taco Bell ever, but and not to say just Taco Bell, Del Taco, or Walmart, or wherever. And you get into those bigger companies, I'm assuming that Walmart has some 401k stuff, and they have some insurance stuff.
Right.
And so as far as being a little practice, we've tried to bring those kind of benefits in. And sometimes your young assistants don't understand benefit. I mean, once a year we have our little enrollment period for medical, and some of them take advantage of it and some of them don't. It's a little bit more stressed now because the government makes you have this insurance, but they have choices to make of like, well, I don't want that taken out of my paycheck to pay this premium. That they don't understand that it could save them in the long run.
Right.
But the same thing with trying to help them save money for retirement. Like, hey, this is a 401k, and that we match you at 4%, and they don't get it. We're trying to educate them on that way. Every once a year we have our financial guys come in and say, hey, if you put just 4% of your income in this, it gets matched. And if you stay here for 3 years, you just doubled your money. And they're just like, well, that's how much money I have on my paycheck. I don't want to do it.
They're worried about the now.
I got to pay my car payment, and I got to have this really cool, the most expensive cell phone, and trying to help them understand that that's part of pay. Is it's not just what you get per hour, but this is also some other benefits. And we try to take care of our assistants and their dental work, and some of them have kids, and we take care of their kids, and other little perks that go along with it, besides just how much do I make per hour.
Right.
And we try to be flexible. In our office, we're open 5 days a week between the two offices in Colorado Springs, but each office only works 4 days, and so a lot of girls really like the idea of like, this is a little bit more than a full-time, or a little bit more than a part-time job. It's not full 40 hours a week, but they can get into the high 30 hours a week and then have a day that they can do things. And a lot of them have families, And so they like that environment, and we're trying to create an environment where it's flexible for them, and but just challenges of running a practice.
Yeah. Well, you got your work cut out for you, that's for sure. So this podcast is about learning to stand out from the pack. What steps have you taken to stand out from other dentists in town, especially now that in Colorado Springs there's far more pediatric dentists than there were when you first started?
There's over 20. I think, again, part of it is back to that quality of care, quality of experience. We have lots of people come in that have had less than desirable experiences at other offices, and it's not necessarily because they're mean or because they or high stress or whatever. And sometimes it's just that if you just sit down and explain to somebody why your child needs to have a crown versus that, well, the doctor saw your kid and he diagnosed this and this is the treatment plan and we'll see you back on Tuesday. And the parent sometimes leaves going, what?
Why?
And so just in my desire of building relationships with parents and helping them understand, it's just a matter of just taking some little bit of time and saying, well, this is why we do these things and this is why your child needs to have a crown, and answering questions and working through that builds a lot of trust. And so we have parents that come through that are like, oh yeah, we've been coming to see you guys for, I had a mom the other day. She said, Dr. Derek, I think we've seen you for 15 years. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. When, she's got an older teenage daughter there. She's like, you did her surgery when she was 3. And it was just kind of fun to just kind of look back and like, wow, it's almost time to retire.
That's been going on for a while.
And at the same time, there's always people that we can't satisfy either.
Right.
I'm sure there's others that have left our practice, and it's heartbreaking because you try as hard as you can, and to have somebody reject you because of whatever reason, and not come back or leave you a bad review. I've had some of those, and it just totally upsets me. I really value what I do, and when somebody trashes me online, it's just like, oh my word, can you tell me the other half of the story?
Yeah, the many hours I put in for you.
But those kind of things hurt. But trying to be the very best that we can be has worked really well. And
you've done like some community stuff, or you've worked to build a community. Like over the years, you've done zoo visits. You'll rent out the zoo and stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of our advertising. It was much more when we've really looked at numbers and where do our patients come from. It's usually insurance lists is always the biggest, and that's a lot of people's first question is do you take my insurance? And it's not always the best environment for the office to take every insurance because some of them don't pay real well.
Right.
But it is good as far as a help to a family to utilize their insurance, and that's a whole other discussion versus somebody that is like fee for service only, which would be an ideal environment because the patient pays the money. The doctor doesn't have to have 10 billion people. He doesn't have to work with insurance companies to do different things. But it creates an environment where it really restricts some families to be able to come see you. So we've tried to be, when I sit down to see a patient, I look at them totally insurance neutral. I have no idea what their insurance is. It doesn't matter. I'm going to provide the best care I can for that child, what they need.
Right.
And we see kids that are on Medicaid over the years, and thanks to my partner who has done some great things at the state level, trying to help increase reimbursement so that those kids can have more access to care. But when I sit down to see a kid, I don't know if he has Medicaid, I don't know if they're cash pay, I don't know. And if I start having questions like, well, I got to guide this treatment plan over to general anesthesia or sedation, what is going to be their costs out of pocket for this family? How am I going to get this child through this experience because they have some needs? That's all trying to be sensitive to make you a place that people want to come, whereas sometimes in dentistry, the only way to increase your income is to see more patients. And so some clinics across town are very much so busy that they lose that personable experience. They may make more money than I do, and that's okay. I don't care because I don't want to work in that environment.
Yeah. Where
it's just patient after patient after patient, and they may see more patients than I do. Therefore, they have bigger revenue, but parents often seek care elsewhere when they just feel like they're just a number and they didn't get.
They feel like cattle.
Yeah, they didn't feel like a personal experience with the doc. They didn't feel like the adequate time was taken for their child. So that's always a struggle when your production is what comes into the practice. And so my discussion with a parent, I can't bill for it. It's non-billable time.
Yeah.
But if I have a parent that's much more comfortable with what I'm going to do procedural-wise, because I've taken the time to explain it to them, you have better outcomes. Parents are happier because they understand why their child has to have a crown on their baby tooth versus, I took my kid to the doctor and they did all these things, and they hate the way it turned out because they didn't have the preparatory phase of it. So that's what we've really focused on, having to build this differently. And so instead of spending advertising dollars on TV and radio ads and other things that some offices do, we have done Zoo Night, and we've done, a long time ago there was a little amusement indoor thing called Mr. Biggs, and we had Mr. Biggs Night, and so we rent this facility, invite all of our patients and their families to come for free, and it's been a lot of fun. COVID kind of shut all that down, and we needed to reassess where we're going with that experience in the future. But it's really fun to go to the zoo and see all your little patients and be in a different environment with them.
Yeah, and show that you're people. And then from an advertising standpoint, it's word of mouth at that point, because then your patients start talking to their friends.
That's what I was going to say. It's always insurance lists, and then it's word of mouth.
Word of mouth, yeah.
A long time ago, you paid hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a Yellow Pages ad, and it shocked me when we first did that, like how expensive that is. And I'm glad we don't have Yellow Pages anymore. But then part of your advertising is having an okay website that people can find, that you're doing your SEO, and how you being ranked on the Google whatevers, and
right.
And so that's another whole other thing that you got to manage on the side, and there are people that find you that way, but a lot of it is just word of mouth. And my family came here because our friends came here, and that's awesome.
If you're good enough at what you do and you have people talking about you enough, they will put in the work on Google to find you, whether you're at the top or not. And that is important to be at the top for people who aren't familiar with you. But yeah, if you've got patients just really flying your colors, then their friends will find you.
Well, and I think when we opened our practice, it was our name. We were Colorado Springs Pediatric Dentistry. It's a big, long name, but man, when you start moving into Colorado Springs, you want to find a pediatric dentist. You typed in all the right words for you to pop up on Google.
You're right there.
And it was total luck versus somebody that names
Maximus Power Teeth. Yeah, yeah,
something else.
Yeah, definitely. Well, awesome, Derek. We appreciate you being on the show today. We'd also just like to thank all of our listeners for their time and their willingness to support us. We couldn't do it without you. And we wish you all the best, and we appreciate you guys tuning in today. Thank you so much.